19 people, including former U.S. President Donald Trump, now have until next Friday to surrender to officials in Georgia to face charges of trying to subvert the state's 2020 election results. One of the 13 new charges in Georgia is the violation of anti-racketeering law, which is a charge typically used in organized crime cases. With a closer look at this fourth indictment against the current frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination, Frank Bowman, is joining us this morning. He is a constitutional scholar and a professor at the University of Missouri Law School, and he is the author of High Crimes and Misdemeanors, A History of Impeachment in the Age of Trump. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this investigation started after details of a phone call from Trump to Georgia's Secretary of State went public. Here's part of that conversation.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
What is the difference between the crimes involved in this Georgia case and Trump's previous 3 indictments?
Well, this particular set of charges in Georgia, to a large extent, mirrors the last federal indictment brought against President Trump, which essentially also dealt with the effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election. What makes this somewhat different is, first of all, that it was brought in a state court, which, as you noted at the top of the hour, means that should Mr. Trump be reelected, he would have essentially no control, nor would the Justice Department under him have any control over these charges or the sentences imposed under them. I would say also another difference is that the last federal case, although it had a number of so-called unindicted co-conspirators, it really only names Trump as the main defendant, and therefore the trial will be only involving Trump. This one, of course, has a whole bunch more folks, ranging from people who are at the White House all the way down to local folks in Georgia who allegedly did a number of things in support of this racketeering scheme.
Yeah, so how does this this charge with a group of people change things, either make it easier or harder to convict for both parties?
Well, if all the current defendants were to stay in the case and the DA decides to bring it all together as a single trial, it'll obviously be a bit crowded in there, and also it causes a good deal of complication with all the different defendants and different lawyers. One doubts that if the case goes to trial, that quite so many people will still be in the case, but that causes a number of just practical complications. And also the very breadth of the indictment means that there's a whole lot more evidence that you have to bring. I do think that a lot of the Georgia-specific charges brought in this case may make proving it a bit easier than perhaps some of the federal charges. For example, in addition to the RICO charge, the racketeering and racketeering influence and corrupt organizations charge, there are Georgia charges for false statements, for attempting to induce officials to violate their oaths, for impersonating public officials. And there aren't any exact analogs for that in federal law. And frankly, they fit the case a little better than some federal statutes do.
In his response early this morning, that was put on his social media, he accused prosecutors of a witch hunt and of wanting to derail his campaign to return to the White House. If he is convicted, could he still become president?
Yes, he could. Under the U.S. Constitution and case law interpreting it, there's a very limited set of qualifications for being president of the United States, and being a convicted felon is not disqualifying. So in theory, he could be elected, and in theory, he could serve, even if, in theory, he was in prison at the time.
I want to ask you quickly about timeline, because there are several people who are named in this indictment. You know, the president is in his late 70s. We know that cases like this can take a long time to come to court. How does time play into this indictment?
Well, time plays, I think, into all 4 of the existing indictments, because they're all in different jurisdictions, 2 in different states and 2 in different federal districts. All of these cases are, in a certain sense, jockeying for position in a queue that's going to have to be started at some point. I think it will be difficult to get any of these cases, particularly the January 6th federal prosecution and this one, to trial before the election. But we'll just have to see.
Great to speak with you this morning, Mr. Bowman. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.